HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Tangled Web, a Cyberstalker, a Deadly Obsession, and the Twisting Path to Justice, by Leslie Rule. Read by Tanya Eby. Preface. I will never forget the first time I felt a killer's eyes burning into me. Yes, the first time. It happened more than once, because it was my job to photograph murderers on trial, and they were not always pleased when I walked up to them and boldly aimed my camera. I was true crime author Anne Rule's photographer and research assistant. I'm also her daughter. I was 17 when my mom started bringing me to trials to take photos for the articles she published in the pulpy-paged detective magazines sold in supermarkets. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, she saw over 1,000 of her articles appear in True Detective and its sister publications. Articles she typed on an old-style typewriter in the middle of the rec room with the TV blaring and 4 noisy kids playing around her. She wrote under male pen names because her editor told her, "No one will believe a woman knows anything about crime." When I started working with her, I was studying photography at a vocational school where I spent half of my high school day, and my teachers tried to discourage me from pursuing a career in a male-dominated field. Female professional photographers were rare at the time. There may not have been many women working as crime reporters and photographers, but unfortunately, there were plenty of murderesses. While the majority of killers are male, cases of females who kill go back as far as history can reach. Cynthia Marler was the first murderess I met. She looked more like a movie star than the hit woman she was. The 28-year-old Hayward, California mother of 3 stood 5 foot 0 inches, weighed 95 pounds, and her thick waves of dark hair spilled past her shoulders. On August 10, 1980, Marler boarded a Seattle-bound plane under an assumed name and prepared to earn the $3,000 and the 1976 Chevy pickup truck she'd been promised for putting an end to an ugly divorce dispute. The petite killer disguised herself in a blonde wig and stalked Wanda Touchstone, following the 34-year-old University of Washington student to a parking lot where she fatally shot her in the neck and head. Witnesses saw Marler fleeing the scene and later picked her out of a police lineup. Testifying in court, one witness remarked that she was very, very small and had a hard stare. I found myself the recipient of that hard stare soon after I approached her during a trial break in a stuffy Seattle courtroom and asked if I could photograph her. "Yes," Marla replied, "but don't take a picture of me when I'm smoking." I took a few shots and was so nervous I forgot her stipulation. I snapped a photo just as she held a Camel cigarette near her face after exhaling a cloud of smoke. Marler reprimanded me, her voice chilled and unforgiving. "I told you not to take a picture of me smoking." Her dark eyes bore into me, and I squirmed as I felt the uncomfortable prickle of a killer's wrath. Anne wrote Cynthia Marler's story twice, once for a magazine, and then years later as a case included in her book, A Rose for Her Grave, Anne Rule's Crime Files, Volume 1. The photo I shot of the petite killer with cigarette in hand appeared in the book. She's smiling brightly in the image, but an instant later, she was angry. I wish I had captured that on film. It might seem odd that my mother exposed her teenage daughter to killers, but she herself met a murderess when she was only 9 years old. In fact, the woman taught her to crochet. Viola was a prisoner in the mom-and-pop jail run by my mother's grandparents in Stanton, Michigan. My great-grandfather, Chris Hansen, was the sheriff, and Anna, my great-grandmother, cooked for the residents. When little Anne spent her summers there, it was her job to carry trays of food to the female prisoners. In addition to the crochet lessons, Viola gave her advice, warning, "Never trust those women who pluck their eyebrows into itty-bitty lines." Young Anne wondered why such a nice lady was behind bars awaiting trial for murder. It was justifiable homicide, the prisoner explained. Yes, she had shot and killed her husband, but she'd caught him in the arms of her best friend in the truck she'd bought for him with tips she made waitressing. The explanation didn't satisfy Anne's curiosity. How could someone take the life of another? The question intrigued her, and she'd one day explore it in the 36 true crime books she authored. She was also fascinated by the methods her family used to solve crimes. Not only was her grandfather the Montcalm County Sheriff, an uncle was the undersheriff, another uncle was the medical examiner, and her aunt worked in the juvenile court. How do they do it? Little Anne wondered as she watched her grandfather and uncles solve crimes. How do they take a button and trace it back to the killer? Sometimes she was allowed to watch them work, and sometimes she helped. She was about 11 when her grandfather and uncle recovered the remains of a John Doe. The man had apparently gone missing a long time before and had been reduced to a pile of bones by the time he was discovered. Anne helped spread the bones out on a table as they attempted to identify him. While forensic science has changed tremendously since my great-grandfather's day, evil has not. It still comes in all shapes and sizes, and he saw his share of it when he hosted some of the Midwest's most dangerous criminals at his jailhouse. He treated them all with respect, and that might be one of the reasons he was legendary for his uncanny ability to coax confessions from killers. He was also famous for the fact he'd never fired a gun in the line of duty in his 24-year career, a distinction so unusual that the story was picked up by wire services in November 1939 and published in dozens of papers, along with a caveat, he still is mighty quick on the draw and a tolerably good marksman. One of Sheriff Hanson's most widely publicized cases occurred on a cold January night in 1941. It was a little after 6 p.m. when 73-year-old farmer Benjamin Perrion bent over a wash basin in his kitchen in his Clear Lake, Michigan home. He splashed water on his face, unaware of the gun pointed at him. Had he known of the rage building in his killer, he probably wouldn't have turned his back on him. The blast from the 16-gauge shotgun ended Ben's life. Sheriff Hanson and his deputies drove to the crime scene, 40 miles west of their Stanton headquarters. They were greeted by 13-year-old Robert Eberhardt and the victim's wife, Sylvia, 63, who'd been milking the cow in the barn at the time of the attack. Partially deaf, she was unaware of the trouble until she found her husband crumpled on the kitchen floor. Young Robert, however, had seen everything. A 6th grader at a rural schoolhouse, he was small for his age. He'd moved in with the Perrions 2 years earlier because his poverty-stricken family had too many children to feed. Robert did chores to earn his keep. Now he said he'd witnessed the shooting and gave a detailed description of the intruders. The bullet had entered the back of Ben's head, just as Robert had indicated, but Sheriff Hanson doubted the story, especially when it kept changing. His suspicions were confirmed when the Perrions' dog retrieved evidence from a snowdrift, carrying it gingerly in his mouth as he trotted back to the house. The killer was none other than the small boy with the wild story. His 4-footed friend had watched him throw the shotgun shell into the snowbank. Whether the pooch thought they were playing a game of fetch or somehow understood that Robert had harmed Ben, the evidence was undeniable. When the dog dropped the shell on the floor, Robert hastily hid it beneath his bed, but deputies soon found it, along with the boy's gun. Confronted with the proof, he claimed intruders had placed the shotgun in his hands and forced him to kill Ben. Eventually, Hanson persuaded him to reveal the truth and sign a confession. While Robert admitted to the murder, he was later quoted saying he felt only a little sorry about what he'd done. In the kid's mind, it was justified. He told Sheriff Hanson that Ben had been mean to him, refusing to give him a vacation, and had once thumped him on the head with a pail. The Perrion case was one of many shocking crimes that Hanson helped to solve. Inspired by her grandfather, Anne dreamed of becoming a policewoman, a dream she achieved at age 22 when she was hired by the Seattle Police Department. Her beat was the city's Pioneer Square area. In a skirt and high heels, part of the required uniform for female cops in the 1950s, she was not allowed to carry a gun. That was a privilege reserved for male officers. Still, she loved her job and was heartbroken when her career in law enforcement was cut short. She'd been on the force about 8 months when the annual physical rolled around, and she flunked the eye exam. The sympathetic examiner allowed her to step up close to the chart, but she still couldn't see the big E. Legally blind without her glasses, she'd be helpless if they were knocked off during a struggle. She was asked to surrender her badge. Devastated, she couldn't bear to drive past Seattle PD and took detours for years. She got married at 23 and had 4 kids by the time she was 32. My father was stricken with what would turn out to be a fatal skin cancer and couldn't contribute much to support the family, so my mother became a freelance writer, publishing a dozen articles each month in detective magazines. Her old friends at the Seattle PD welcomed her back and gave her access to confidential files. To enrich her reporting, she went back to school to study police science, enrolling in classes such as crime scene investigation and arrest, search, and seizure. I took these same classes in 1978, not because I was planning on going into the field, but because I found them interesting and chose them as electives. In 1971, Anne was not only a busy mother, she was a full-time writer and part-time student. I took it for granted then, but now I wonder how she found time to volunteer. She would later say it was something she felt she had to do. She was partly motivated by her guilt over the fact that she'd been unable to rescue her only sibling. At age 21, Don was overcome with a depression his family couldn't help him shake. News of his fate appeared on the front page of the December 31, 1954 edition of the San Mateo Times. Beneath the headline, "Whiz Student Can't Face Life, Dies, Suicide." He was discovered in his carbon monoxide-filled car, parked with the engine running. In his last note, Don Rex Stackhouse apologized, said he loved his family, and asked for his body to be given to Stanford Medical School, where he was an honor student. While Anne couldn't help her brother, she hoped to help other suicidal people and saw an opportunity to do that at the Crisis Clinic, a nonprofit telephone hotline for troubled people. She signed up to volunteer and went through the training program. Teams worked in pairs, answering phones around the clock at the Crisis Clinic headquarters, a somewhat creepy and otherwise empty Victorian house on Seattle's Capitol Hill. Anne was given the Tuesday night shift, and her hotline partner was a work-study law student, paid an hourly wage. He was 20 years her junior and reminded her of the brother she'd lost. She developed a sisterly affection toward the man who sat beside her and was so gentle with callers. Together they saved many lives. If one partner discovered they had a suicide in progress, they'd signal the other to alert authorities to trace the call, a process that could take over an hour in the 1970s. I remember my mom fixing sandwiches to bring to her Crisis Clinic partner because she worried Ted Bundy was too skinny. Yes, Ted Bundy. Today his name is almost synonymous with the term serial killer. But he wasn't infamous back then. Anne considered him a good friend, and they had long conversations about their personal lives on slow nights when the phones didn't light up. Eventually their time together on the hotlines ended, but they kept in touch and saw each other at the Crisis Clinic's 1973 Christmas party. Soon after, Seattle was on high alert because of the sudden and inexplicable disappearances of several local teen girls and young women. Everyone was mystified because the victims weren't the type to take risks and had vanished from populated areas, often in the light of day. Detectives suspected a cult was sacrificing maidens. Anne submitted a proposal about the disappearances to a publisher and got her first book contract. There was, however, a condition. If the case was not solved, the book would not be published. The case, of course, was solved, and the bizarre coincidence would have been too contrived to be believable in fiction. What are the chances a writer would contract to write a book about an unknown killer, only to learn that the culprit was her friend? After he was arrested, charged, convicted, and sent to death row to await execution for homicides in Florida, Ted confessed to some of the Washington murders. Anne's editor balked, unsure if her book was worth publishing. "No one has ever heard of Ted Bundy," he told her, but he saw the project through. The Stranger Beside Me was published in 1980. Several best-selling books later, she'd learned so much about killers, she was invited to serve on the FBI panel that developed the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP. Created in 1985, it was the first computer system to link unsolved violent crimes from police departments nationwide. Prior to that, serial killers and rapists could attack in various counties and states to avoid detection. For the first time, detectives became aware of crimes committed in other jurisdictions, detected patterns, and worked together to make swift arrests. While I'm proud of my mom's accomplishments, I'm most proud that she remained a kind and down-to-earth person. She never let fame go to her head, preferred costume jewelry to diamond rings, and loved to shop at Goodwill. I inherited my mom's fondness for thrift shops and her fascination for dark mysteries. But true crime was her thing. I wanted to carve out my own niche and sought out mysteries of another sort. After writing dozens of articles for national magazines in the early 1990s, I published a number of best-selling books with paranormal themes. When my mom and I traveled together, I accompanied her to trials to photograph the cops and killers for her books, and afterward, I investigated haunted places for my books. Sometimes she went with me. She, too, had a fascination for ghosts and possessed a strong sixth sense. I had no desire to move into her territory, though I did come close with one book, When the Ghost Screams, True Stories of Victims Who Haunt, covered cases of haunted locations where the earthbound spirits of victims had been seen wandering. It must be a combination of DNA and osmosis that has finally compelled me to embrace my mother's genre and write a Tangled web. I was influenced by hundreds of emails from my mom's readers, some who've practically begged me to write a true crime book. Anne had authored 2 books each year for the last 2 decades of her career. She has been gone since the summer of 2015, and her readers desperately miss her books. I won't pretend to have my mother's expertise on crime or expect to replace her in her readers' hearts, but she was a wonderful mentor to me, and I've tried to honor her with a carefully researched story that I hope will help me to carry on the family tradition of saving lives. Sheriff Hansen did it first as he protected his community from criminals, and Anne did it with her books that warned about the dangerous people who walk among us. Nothing made her happier than the letters from readers, thanking her for saving their lives. Because of her books, they recognized danger when they saw it headed their way. With this story, I hope to warn readers about crimes my great-grandfather could not have imagined as he embarked upon his police career over a century ago. In his pre-computer world, cyberstalkers did not yet exist. Murderers have not changed since the 1920s, when he began arresting them. They remain as cold-hearted as they were in the 1960s, when my mother first began to write about them. Killers have not changed, but their methods have. They now have an arsenal of electronic devices they can use to dupe us, but we can outsmart them by learning their tricks. Introduction. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Sir Walter Scott, 1771 to 1832, Scottish novelist, playwright, and poet. A spider, some believe, cannot be trapped in its own web. While rare, a careless spider can be caught in the net it constructed to capture prey. The fact it happens so seldom is a mystery that scientists have yet to solve. One theory suggests that the nimble creatures avoid becoming tangled in their webs by dancing lightly across the sticky strands, with only the hairs on the tips of their legs making contact with their clever traps. While A Tangled Web is not the story of an actual spider's web, it does follow the wicked journey of a predator who showed no more compassion for victims than a spider shows for the hapless fly caught in its web. The predator in this account used a different kind of web to commit cruel crimes, the World Wide Web. The majority of us using the web today are still in awe of the fact that billions of people around the globe have the ability to connect instantaneously with a soft tap of a finger on a computer keyboard, that we can access an electronic system interlinking millions of information venues sooner than we can inhale our next breath. Invented in 1989, the web has become an integral part of most Americans' lives in only the last 2 decades. As of this writing, it is still so new that most of us are too naive to realize the extent of the myriad ways it can be used to set traps designed to deceive us. We often fail to recognize the predators that prowl there, intent upon stealing our money and sometimes our lives. The killer in A Tangled Web developed an expertise in the electronic world and used it to assist in not only committing crimes, but in the concealment of them. Like the rare spider caught in its own web, the human counterpart in this tragedy spun deceptions so complex that they eventually became trapped in a web of their own making. Unfortunately, it was not before blood was shed, and many hearts were broken. Chapter 1. When Cherokee Montoya heard that her friend had been shot, she was stunned. The violence occurred on December 5, 2015. The 911 operator took the call at 6:41 p.m., and she soon dispatched emergency vehicles to the scene, Big Lake Park in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Most people called Shanna Elizabeth Golyar by her nickname, Liz, but to Cherokee, she had always been Shanna. Cherokee was not surprised to hear that Shanna had gone alone to a deserted park after dark. She was trying to clear her head, trying to gather herself together. It's what she usually did, quite often. She would just go somewhere silent so she could think. Cherokee is still unclear about what occurred that night. "I don't have all the facts," she admits, and there is a hint of bitterness in her voice as she describes what happened exactly as it was told to her. She saw the shadow first. They told her to get on the ground. If she didn't do it, they were going to shoot her, she explains, adding that Shanna got down on the cold ground as instructed. They shot her anyway. Cherokee and Shanna had met while working in a distribution warehouse about a year earlier in Omaha, Nebraska, and had hit it off immediately. Though Shanna was about a decade older than Cherokee, they seemed to have a lot in common. Both were mothers, and she noted that Shanna appeared to work as hard as she did. "We met and we bonded really quickly. We just started hanging out. She'd come over and watch my kids, and I'd watch her kids." She has no problem recalling the good times, but Cherokee is still bewildered by the shooting and the craziness that led up to it. "I don't watch the news," she confides. No one can blame her for being confused about the dark sequence of events that led to crimes so complex that they confounded seasoned detectives. And no one can blame her for turning away from the news. Friends had told her bits and pieces, and that was upsetting enough, especially because Cherokee blames herself. "I didn't stop it. I didn't see it. I could have said something." Her voice trails off as she shakes her head. In reality, there was nothing she could have done to prevent the horror that tiptoed so quietly into the lives it ruined that no one saw it coming. It, in fact, began long before Cherokee entered the picture. Dave Kroupa liked women. He made no secret about that, and he made no apologies. He was upfront with every woman he met. He was not looking for commitment, and he made no promises to the contrary. He had, after all, recently ended a 12-year relationship with Amy Flora, the mother of his 2 children, and he was just getting used to being on his own again. Both Dave and Amy had tried very hard to make it work, to hold their family together for the kids' sake. In the end, they came to the painful realization that they just weren't meant to be together. They agreed to remain friends and to work together to make the transition as easy as possible on the children. The summer of 2012, Dave was still smarting from the breakup and a little bit lonely. He was glad to have regular visits with his kids, but he was otherwise alone. He lived in a bare-bones Omaha apartment in a huge complex near Hyatt Tire, the shop he managed. At age 34, he was healthy, attractive, and faced years of empty nights if he didn't make an effort to socialize. He realized very quickly that it wasn't hard to meet women. They were as close as his laptop computer, and with the press of a key, he could bring up the profiles of hundreds of attractive females who were hoping for friendship and romance. Most computer-savvy singles looking for companionship are aware of the many dating websites they can join. Match.com, Coffee Meets Bagel, OkCupid, eHarmony, Tinder, and Plenty of Fish are among the more popular sites where those seeking romance can view the profiles of thousands of others looking for the same. Dave was drawn to Plenty of Fish, a website claiming to be the largest dating venue in the world. Founded in 2003, the site boasts 80 million members, with 14 million daily visitors, 60,000 new people joining each day, and over 1 billion messages exchanged between singles each month. A basic membership is free, and visitors to the site can search for new friends by gender, age, ethnicity, and location, and then scroll through the results like a kid leafing through a toy catalog, though no one is for sale, of course. and the interest must be mutual before arrangements for dates are made. Each profile features a photograph, a nickname, and whatever general information the poster is willing to share, such as non-smoker with average body type, born under the sign of Gemini, Caucasian, no kids, works in the service industry, or curvy single mother, loves to dance and eat chocolate, just looking to have some fun on Friday nights when the ex has the kids. As with any dating website, there are risks. There is no guarantee that the poster's information is accurate. There is no guarantee that the attractive, seemingly charming individual with the enticing description is not a dangerous felon. While the majority of people seeking dates are harmless, not everyone is truthful. Most of the fibs are benign, a few years or pounds shaved off, or a photo that was taken last century represented as recent. Sometimes those trolling for romance are married, pretending to be unattached. One dissatisfied member of Plenty of Fish recently lashed out online, complaining, "I was guaranteed a single man. The company did not screen this person well. I am very angry. This site needs to be better." The grumbler clearly felt betrayed, but she was naive to think that website managers had the capability to screen out liars. It is simply not possible to vet 60,000 new members each day. Even if thousands of website employees worked around the clock to try to verify information supplied by members, they would fall short. It is far too easy to create fake profiles in online venues. Females are particularly vulnerable when it comes to dating strangers met online. Many women refuse to meet a first date anywhere but a public place, and some even snap photos of the license plates on the cars of their new beaux, sending the images via text to friends. A somewhat morbid precaution should they go missing. Dave Kroupa understood why women were cautious. He couldn't really blame them. He had heard the news stories about women attacked by men they met online. He didn't argue when the women he was interested in suggested coffee in a public place for their first dates. It did not occur to Dave that online dating could be hazardous for him. A former member of the National Guard, he could take care of himself. "I don't think of myself as really badass, but I'm not going to hide under a rock. You do what you do, and hopefully it turns out all right." Dave knew some of the ladies he chatted with had jealous ex-boyfriends. Were any of these men so possessive that they would resort to violence to eliminate the competition? It was not something he worried about. He saw nothing risky about online flirting. For every online dating horror story, there are thousands of romantic connections so successful they result in marriage. According to a June 2013 article in the New York Daily News, a study by researchers working with proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, PNAS, found that more than one-third of marriages in the U.S. began with online dating. But marriage was the furthest thing from Dave's mind. "I wanted to have a little fun," he confides. "I did my 14 years. I was never married, but it was as good as. We had the house and the 2 kids and the white picket fence." Few breakups are not painful, and Dave had barely begun to process the end of his relationship when he made the decision to start dating. He wanted to cut loose and enjoy the company of like-minded women. He found lots of profiles for attractive women on the Plenty of Fish website, and he dated his share of them: Sue, Pam, Joanne, Kelly. Not in his worst nightmares could Dave have imagined there would come a day when an attorney in a murder trial would rattle off the names of the women he had met that summer of 2012. Mary, Kathy, Joyce, Beth, Margaret, Sandra. If the chemistry was there and the woman was willing, Dave was more than happy to explore a sexual relationship. But he had standards. "I wouldn't say I have exceptionally high morals. I'm not against hooking up or booty calls, but I like to know the woman." Not everyone subscribing to online dating sites has manners, he notes. "A couple of times I responded to somebody I met online, went over to her house, and immediately she was jumping on me. That's a little off-putting for me. I'm crazy, I'm kinky, but I'm not that wild." Jenna, Diane, Megan, June, Lori, Tracy. When the names are read from a list, it seems like Dave has had a lot of dates, but it was not as if he had sex with all of them. In fact, in most cases it was only a coffee date. The chemistry just wasn't there, and they quickly parted. Females are drawn to Dave. He exudes the kind of masculine confidence that comes with humility. At his core, even if he does not consciously recognize it, he is so sure of who he is that he has no need for arrogance, and the self-effacing comments come easily. He is attractive with or without the beard he sometimes allows to grow. With his intense blue eyes and the kind of wavy blonde hair that women are tempted to rake their fingers through, he gets his share of looks from the ladies, but it may be his laugh that is most...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?